Allies for Refugee Integration Project, RE for short, is a collaboration between OCASI and Refugee 613 that's been in the works for the past 3 years. The RE project had 3 phases. The first phase, the research phase. In this phase, we really wanted to better understand the settlement-sponsor collaboration when it comes to supporting PSRs. This phase really allowed us to identify promising practices and better understand the gaps that exist in those collaborations. Our second phase, the design phase, we really wanted to hold multi-stakeholder design workshops to develop ideas for addressing challenges in collaboration between settlement and sponsorship. And then our third phase, the testing phase. This is where we really wanted to test our ideas through pilots. One of the ideas that we tested, and the foundation of this promising practice really, is what we called connecting intentionally for arrival-ready communities. This practice is an early start coordinated PSR settlement pilot. The aim was to connect sponsors and PSRs with settlement service agencies prior to and immediately following the PSR's arrival. This improved settlement planning, knowledge sharing, and coordination of efforts. RE's early start coordinated settlement model really allowed us to have a more effective and efficient settlement process by facilitating knowledge sharing and aligning sponsors and settlement workers' actions to support PSR settlement. We had a dedicated settlement worker providing a single point of contact through which the PSR continues to access settlement support, and sponsors access the tools and information needed to be more effectively supportive and helpful to the PSR's settlement. In turn, SPOs leveraged sponsors' voluntary effort and drew from their insight into the PSR's needs. This created a more effective, responsive approach to settlement service provision.
There are a number of elements that made this a promising practice. First of all, it really relies on enhancing the existing expertise and knowledge that settlement workers and sponsors already have, and bringing them together so that they can collaborate more efficiently. There are a number of elements that contributed to the success of this practice. The first one has to do with timing. It's essential that that sponsored newcomer and the sponsor is connected into settlement services as soon as possible, and this was the major factor in its success. One of the ways that happened for sponsors was through a pre-arrival meeting, so that that sponsor and settlement worker could even do in-depth settlement planning before the newcomer arrived. And it helped the settlement worker because they were also prepared with knowledge of their clients, with the ability to serve that client right away upon their arrival. Another important part of the success of this practice was having a single point of contact for a settlement worker for a newcomer and a sponsor. So one of the things most appreciated about this practice by both the newcomers and the sponsors was that they didn't have to search around, they didn't have to struggle to figure out where to go to get information. I would say the final key component of this practice is that there was organizational learning and relationship partnership building between sponsorship agreement holders and settlement agencies. And this is already happening in the sector, but it's not formalized. It's piecemeal, and it depends on the agency. It depends on the SAW. Each is an expert in what they do. The SAWs know a lot about sponsorship, about the application process. And the settlement agencies, of course, are experts when it comes to settlement and integration. And so by bringing that together, a lot of learning happened. And that's the thing, actually, that will continue into the future. These agencies want to continue to build those relationships. So I think that really shows the success of that part of the practice. Partner organizations were essential to the success of the Allies for Refugee integration process. In a lot of ways. So we have a strong advisory group that supported the RE project with representation from settlement agencies, sponsorship agreement holders, newcomers, and sponsors. More specifically for this practice, we worked with partner agencies to identify needs, as well as develop the pilots that ultimately we tested across Ontario. We worked with 3 main pilot sites for this practice, including Catholic Cross-Cultural Services in the Greater Toronto area, the YMCA of Three Rivers in Kitchener-Waterloo, and also Mennonite Central Committee of Ontario, which is a SAW. And lastly, the YMCA of Southwestern Ontario, along with the Diocese of London Refugee Ministries, which is also a SAW in the area. In this practice, over the course of 2020 in 4 different locations, we worked with 23 sponsor groups, 68 privately sponsored refugees, and 5 settlement workers that directly participated in pilot activities. In addition, we trained over 153 settlement workers on how to better work with sponsored refugees and to understand the PSR program.
There's many roles that our organization took in this pilot project. In our model, the 3-way partnership started with a pre-arrival meeting with the sponsors, the SAW, and the settlement worker to review roles and responsibilities. One of the things that we worked on together was creating a document that we called the Collaborative Action Plan, or we called it the CAP form. This document was used in the very first meeting with the sponsors to identify and explain the roles and responsibilities of the sponsors, of MCC, and the settlement worker. And we used it with all of our groups. Another key feature in this project, and an area that I would want to make sure is highlighted, is the impact of the strengthened relationship between the SAW and the settlement providing organization and the impact that it had on our work. This building of our collaboration and deepening of our relationship led to mutual learning and training opportunities that were able to be shared between the SAW and the SPO. For example, we recently invited YMCA caseworkers into our sponsorship orientation sessions as an opportunity for caseworkers to learn more about the sponsorship process and how our organization works. Over time, we've also noticed emerging needs among our sponsorship groups, and we've been able to collaborate with the YMCA to host webinars and trainings for newcomers and sponsors on topics such as financial literacy and the transition to month 13.
There were many reasons why we were motivated as an agency to join the pilot. First of all, this pilot will help us setting the tone for a comprehensive relationship with everyone on the table, like with the co-sponsors, with the SAW, with the private sponsors as well. It's an opportunity to clearly define the roles, the responsibility between all of us. So no need for anyone to work in silo. We will work as a group. And the main goal for us as a settlement agency is to make sure that the PSRs become aware of a well-established ecosystem. This ecosystem will help them in their settlement. And we believe that the early connection, if it's happened at the right time, we can make sure that the outcomes will be better in terms of accessing immigrant services or programs that funded and community resources, of course. Something also with the outcomes, it came to my mind that the co-sponsors play a huge role in supporting the families emotionally and mentally by constantly sharing life skills and tips to the PSRs. And it's an ongoing support that they will provide, and it makes a difference in the life of the PSR. So I can't emphasize enough how important it is to support the co-sponsors, just to make sure that they are not overloaded and they have all the necessary information to play this role.
Since 2019, we worked with our advisory to create a logic model and key indicators for success. We had input at every step of the journey, and this was really important, that settlement workers, sponsors, newcomers were able to give their feedback as to how they were experiencing this practice, and that we could adjust throughout the testing period to continue to respond to what we were hearing. Once we had developed the pilots, we did work with each of the pilot agencies to develop their own framework for evaluation because it was key that it was integrated within their normal kind of routine evaluation of their services. We had a mixed methods data collection plan that involved in-depth interviews, online surveys, reporting from the agencies on different outcomes and indicators. We had a lot of really great feedback and meaningful feedback from those who participated. For example, settlement workers who were part of these pilots talked about the efficiencies that they saw in connecting with a sponsor and settlement sponsored refugee right upon arrival. They liked to see the way that through their support, the sponsor and newcomer even were able to enhance their relationship because there was more clarity on what supports were available. Pilot agencies reported that there was reduced duplication of efforts between the sponsor and the settlement worker. And they really appreciated seeing sponsors as allies, and instead of just seeing sponsors perhaps at a moment of crisis. And so they were able to build more of a trusting relationship from the beginning because they were not already in a moment of challenge in supporting a newcomer who perhaps didn't have what they needed. Another piece of evidence we have that this was a promising practice is that all of the agencies who participated, even if they don't have additional funding, intend to carry forward a lot of the learning that they had through these practices. They've reported that they intend to continue to work SAWS and SPOs together on referrals, on orientation to services, and they really support the idea of scaling up on a broader scale. The evidence of support from clients came through interviews as well as reporting from our pilot agencies. The sponsored refugees reported some really interesting results in terms of the supportive nature of this pilot on their sponsors. They reported that their sponsors seemed more informed and able to support them through participating in this project, which we thought was really a great feedback. They especially also appreciated the clarity that the settlement worker brought to their first few weeks here in Canada in planning out the things they'd need to settle here, especially during COVID-19.
We've received a lot of positive feedback from clients and participants in the project. One sponsor shared the importance of having a central place to turn, that it becomes really tiring for sponsors of trying to navigate all the different systems and pieces of paperwork and processes that are out there when supporting a newcomer family. They find that often they do a lot of unnecessary research when the pros already know how to do these different pieces. So for sponsors, being connected to a settlement worker enhanced the sponsor's capacity, lessened sponsor burnout, and ensured that newcomers were being adequately supported. By having a direct connection with a settlement worker, the newcomers reported feeling increased independence, being able to advocate for themselves, ask questions, and have someone who was a great resource and connection for them, especially during lockdowns. In addition, this model lessened the anxiety of newcomers and sponsors about how to access necessary supports and enabled smooth transitions off of sponsorship to what is known as month 13.
It was a really heartwarming experience to see the people that we helped at one point become able to sponsor and have their family members, welcome their family members in Canada. This is something that we experienced in this pilot. It was really powerful and rewardful for us because the co-sponsors that we have, they came and they know that we can support their family members the same way we support them at one point in their life.
One of the things that our evaluation really contributed towards was our final recommendations to IRCC for changes to policy and practice to improve the settlement journey of sponsored refugees. The first one is to ensure that sponsored refugees have the support they need through an early start, intentional connection, this practice we've been describing of a pre-post arrival connection. So we have a lot of recommendations for IRCC about how they could operationalize this, all the way from funding settlement agencies to work with sponsors to small fixes like including sponsors in meetings where appropriate. The second recommendation is that settlement agencies and SAWs should be supported to create more formalized organizational partnerships, both through financial and institutional support, that they can be allowed to work more collaboratively in a day-to-day way. And our last recommendation is to further define and test this practice in order to scale it up further. There are a few places that we think could be further tested, including working with group of 5 sponsors, which we were not able to do, seeing how it interacts with different regional approaches, because this was only tested in Ontario, and also working more with small grassroots organizations and maybe small SAWs as well, to see how it is that this practice would look in an organization that's maybe less well-resourced than those we worked with. The major thing that would limit transferability is that of capacity, especially with sponsorship agreement holders, many of whom are understaffed or rely on volunteers. And so many of them have expressed that while they see a real value in connecting intentionally with settlement agencies, they don't always have the staff time to be able to develop the partnerships in order to do that. Settlement agencies as well, it's not within their current funding envelope to work proactively with sponsors, and that they also have limitations in terms of confidentiality. That means that they can't always work with sponsors. And so that is why any kind of adoption of this practice would also need policy change and support to be successful, both from IRCC as well as down to an organizational level. The other challenge for transferability is that there is not a one-size-fits-all model. I wish I could tell you there were, but the fact is that all settlement agencies, SAWs, sponsors, and of course newcomers are unique, and their needs and their preferences about how they connect are going to be different. So all we can do is provide the information about how we tested this practice, what it looked like in different agencies, and those agencies will need to do the hard work of figuring out how it might fit within their current practices before taking it on in a full manner.
From this pilot, we learned a lot, and a key thing that we learned is that the information sharing is important, and connecting co-sponsors with a settlement agency from the beginning is crucial. This type of standardization, collective approach, and implementation of a continuity of support process, in our opinion, only stands to enhance the experience of all PSRs and sponsors. The sponsorship process is a major commitment, and when different parties who are offering different skills and resources, they come together like we did in this pilot, it can streamline the process and it can make it easier and for each party to achieve their desired goals in the settlement plan, and then everyone will be happy at the end.